Hello! My name is Felicity, and on behalf of McCreate Theatre, I am going to be talking a little bit about mental health and creating performances, or creating work as an artist in general. Now, I must say straight off the bat, I'm not a health professional. I don't have, a wide array of health training or anything like that. I'm just going to be talking about my experience as an artist and the fact that I suffered from depression, and sometimes the two are very difficult to kind of coexist. But we must still make work, and we must still find ways to be okay with ourselves. So, things to say. First and foremost, I think there's a couple of things that go through a lot of different artists' minds, either when approaching a work, when in the middle of a work, when at the end of the work, and it can happen at any stage of your career, or it can just happen throughout your career. So, for example, I get a lot of social anxiety when I'm first starting a new project. And this happens often because I am generally leading it as a director or as a performance maker with a top hat on, obviously. And often I think that translates into a lot of pressure for me to have all the answers, or to be right, or to, already know exactly what it is or where we're going. Now, it's a hilarious paradox that, because the most exciting thing for me as an artist is always what we as creatives find on the floor together. So what is made in rehearsals, what is stumbled upon. And generally it's going to be 5 times better than anything that I've created in my mind elsewhere. That is also the part that I love. So it's, we're wonderful walking contradictions, aren't we? So yes, I can often feel a lot of social anxiety at the beginning of a project. And then I also generally at the beginning of a project and towards the end of it can feel an overwhelming fear of being found out as a fraud. Now, I've actually heard this, it's true for a huge amount of creatives, those that are also incredibly successful and well established. The biggest fear is finding out that maybe it's going to be this is the show that will, unveil me as the fraud that I am, which basically means we're scared that we're not enough, which I think is very human, very, very vulnerable, and I think it's a beautiful thing that we do it anyway. I think that's the most kind of beautiful gift that the arts and artists can give to those who are consuming it or viewing it, is that sense of vulnerability, of being seen, and potentially being judged. So for me, those are two of the things that certainly come up. The idea of being a fraud, of not being enough, and the social anxiety that I get. So generally for me that manifests in avoiding things, or over-preparing. Now, over-preparing isn't necessarily a bad thing, but at some point it's very clear that you need to stop, because you can prepare and prepare, but once you actually get into the rehearsal room, that's when the actual work and the action kind of happens, and the findings and those kind of eureka moments. So for me, those are the things that happen. This can also occur not just on projects, but for grant applications or residencies or things like that. So with those, again, avoidance can happen, and some of the things that I like to do to stop the negative talk that happens in my head is to actually write it down, to write down everything that I'm scared and worried about, and say, great, that's it, You've had your moment. Fear, you've come, you've taken over, you've had your moment. Now you just need to be quiet. Don't need to go away. But for now, I just need to get on with a little bit of work. So a lot of that came from seeing, oh my stars, the author of Eat, Pray, Love, whose name I've forgotten. Anyway, from seeing her TED Talk around inspiration and the elusive nature of genius, and this idea that, you know, people are geniuses, whereas previously it was thought that genius is working through you, that you're just the vessel. So for me, that was kind of nice because it's shut the ego up a little bit and stop the pressure, because it's not about you. Yeah. So the more I'm actually able to get into that mindset that it's not about me, that this is my job and the work that I have to do, and I'm just going to do it, the better, because it means that you're not completely tying your self-worth and value to, you know, getting the part or getting the right review or getting the funding or whatever it is. So write down all your fears and put it away. Try and think about art or the work that you're approaching as a lab. So it's like you're a scientist and you just have a bunch of questions that you're trying to work through, a bunch of tests. And every negative result, every, you know, failed test, it's just data. It's just information. And that information is still useful because it gets you one step closer to what it is that you're actually wanting and needing and meaning to find. And no one was really ever scared of data. It's just words on a page or numbers. That's okay. So the other kind of 3 things I have for you, 3 tips. Write down as many questions as you have about the work, because the more you can do that, the more you can get yourself out of yourself, you're out of your own head, and it starts to kind of light that kind of curious detective that you originally approached this work and wanted to approach this work. So just write down those questions. Don't underestimate the fortunes that a break can yield. Give yourself a break. Go do something else. Go do something fun. And within that, you know, if you find that you are only able to concentrate or work for a certain smaller amounts of time, then just know yourself and say, great, I'm going to spend 10 minutes working. I'm going to have then a 5-minute break. Then I'm going to spend 15 minutes working, another 5-minute break. That's so fine. You know, there is no one way to do anything really. And especially as artists, the more you know yourself, the more you know how you work, how your mind works, the better you're going to work. And then final tip is go do something physical. If you're getting to the point where you're just going round and round in your head with either negative thoughts or what ifs or, you know, whatever else is going on, go for a little run, stretch, take a moment, breathe in for 5 seconds, breathe out for 5 seconds, breathe in for 5 seconds, hold for 5 seconds, breathe out for 5 seconds. Do something that brings you back into your body in this moment, because your body does a wonderful little trick. So once you get to the point where you're kind of running and exhausted and out of breath, it's very hard for your mind to kind of still stay on these negative thoughts or, you know, judge you. All it's doing is like feeling those endorphins and breathing. So those are my tips. Firstly, everyone thinks that they're a fraud or they're not good enough or they're worried that they're going to be found out. Secondly, You are good enough, you're worthy. Own it, love it. Try and combat those thoughts. Thirdly, treat things like a lab. Be a scientist, be a curious detective. Write down your findings. Don't attach it to meaning about yourself. It's just more information. Fourthly, write down as many questions as you can. Become curious and curiouser and curiouser about the work that you're doing. Fifthly, take a break. Sixthly, do something physical and then jump back into it. I hope that's helpful. I hope I watch this and follow my own advice.